To the Point with Michael Williams.
Are we really prepared to say that we're powerless in the face of such carnage? That the politics are too hard? Are we prepared to say that such violence visited on our children year after year after year is somehow the price of our freedom?
After the school massacre, President Obama calls for a change of culture and a change in gun laws. Good morning and welcome to the Point. Some are saying the killings of 26 youngsters and adults, 6 adults, 20 school children at the elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, may well be the tipping point toward tighter gun regulations in our country. More specifically, renewed talk of limiting assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines. Joining me now to discuss gun regulations as well as security and mental health issues that play into all of this, Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw. Sir, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Let's talk first. Last week, the president named Joe Biden to head a commission that will look at, among other things, a possible ban on assault weapons, limiting ammunition clips, also looking at closing holes that allow people to go to a gun show, let's say, and buy a weapon without a background check. Let's start at the top. Do you support a ban on assault weapons?
Absolutely. I think that they should have never let the ban lapse to start with. It was a good law. They should put it back in. We don't have to reinvent a lot of stuff there. We just have to reinstitute what they had before.
It's a hot topic. Some will say, Sheriff, Second Amendment, how can you say that? How do you say that?
Well, the Second Amendment gives you the right to bear arms. And I'm not saying take everybody's gun away, and I'm not saying people shouldn't have the right to protect themselves. They should.
You're talking about a class of weapon.
Absolutely. But, you know, every amendment has some parameters involved in it. You have the right to free speech. That doesn't mean you can yell fire in a crowded theater. So we're just talking about a small segment of that particular amendment.
Let me ask you, too, about ammunition clips. Do you also think it makes sense to limit the size and amount of ammo any one person can buy?
Yeah, 30-round clips, that's military. That is assault weapons. That's killing people. Nobody goes hunting with a 30-round ammunition clip. Most rifles have 3, 6, some have 10 ammunition clips. A pistol, automatic pistols have 6 to 10. There's nobody that needs a 30-round banana clip magazine.
Sheriff, Florida, a lot of gun shows. There's a loophole that allows you to go to a gun show, no background check there.
Right.
Is that a big oversight? Does it need to be closed?
It does, without a doubt. It's the same difference. You can walk in today and say, I would like 5,000 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition. You don't even have to show a driver's license. That's insane. Nobody needs armor-piercing ammunition unless you're going to put a bulletproof vest.
What about this argument that we've heard from some people worried about their children or their grandchildren who say, arm the teachers, allow more guns, and specifically allow people to have guns in schools? Do you think that'd be a good idea?
We don't want to have the wild, wild west here. I think there's a way to make our schools a heck of a lot safer than they are right now. I think there's a way to make sure that our community is going to be safer from the people that should not have access to these firearms. You know, if we stopped selling firearms today, it would be 200 or 300 years before we get to the point where they're not the proliferation out there. When you got 200 million firearms out there, that's not going to...
200 million.
Oh, at least right now. I mean, that's the estimates that I've heard. So, you know, I don't want to have a wild, wild west situation where everybody's walking down the streets that's got a gun on them. Who's going to draw fastest?
There are some who argue because of that proliferation, the criminals will still get a hold of theirs, and the argument is, from gun rights advocates, what about us? You're arguing somewhere you've got to stop the endless cycle, and a ban on assault weapons you think is a good start.
Yeah, that's a start. Somewhere we have to draw that line in the sand and say, going forward, here's what we're going to limit, and that's assault weapons.
And sadly, you've had to go to too many scenes, whether it was here or in support of your colleagues in other communities where assault weapons came into play. How much more dangerous than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago for your men and women on the streets because of the amount of weaponry, including high-powered weaponry?
Absolutely, tremendously. The 2 deputies killed in Dade County last year, they were shot with AK-47s. AK-47s and assault weapons are the gun of choice of gangs. That's why I had to purchase rifles for all my deputies out there, because they were outgunned. They would go to scenes where, you know, the bad guys have got rifles in their hands and they get out with a pistol. That's not a fair fight.
Do we need, we have 1020 life, do we need to look also at gun laws that even tighten to a greater degree what happens if you even show up at a scene with, let's say, a high-powered assault rifle, intent on crime?
I really think that any crime that's involving a firearm should have a much stiffer penalty than other crimes. You know, but then we got to get the courts to enforce that. We've got to make sure that if the laws are on the books, they're going to be enforced.
This topic to be continued, but I know that one of the passions that you have is about how the mental health component plays into this. And in fact, the Vice Presidential Task Force assigned those duties by the President will look into mental health and how this plays into all of this. There was an article in the Miami Herald last week said the only way a lot of people get mental health services by ending up in jail. How true is that statement in Palm Beach County?
Very true. We're probably the biggest mental health provider in the county. Now, this is not an indictment of the mental health people in the system, because they want to do the right thing. They're just woefully underfunded. Every day, we probably either medicate or counsel between 300 and 400 inmates.
Every single day?
Every single day. My mental health wards are capacity of 92. They're full all the time. And you're talking about a lot of medication involved here. The people that come into the county jail, most of them are there because they have issues. Some of them have very serious issues. Some of them are already medicated or over-medicated or off their medication. So, it's a very costly part of the health system in the jails.
What can you do about it? What would you like to do about it? What are you doing about it?
Well, we already have a behavioral sciences unit within the Sheriff's Office, and it's a smaller group, and it was mainly about what we do with our employees inside and critical incidences on the street. If we have something that's contained, we can get some professionals there. What I want to do is expand that, and I want to partner with mental health here in the county, but I want to expand this unit. I want to get a grant and make it to a 30 or 40 or 50 man unit that's a hybrid. Not all deputies, mental health professionals, social workers, counselors. So we can have a hotline established, which I'm going to do, so people in the community that have information about somebody that's troubled, somebody that has indicated that they're going to go do bad things, they have an avenue to come and talk to us, call us on the phone and say, listen, I think there's somebody you need to go look at. Now, two things happen here. And what happens here is it's based on the Secret Service model. If the Secret Service gets information that there's somebody that is a little mentally unbalanced and making threats against the president, first thing they do is they go interview them. Two things happen there. One, now this guy knows that they're on the radar with law enforcement. Number two is they can start doing some background information and find out, did the guy go get a bulletproof vest at a gun show? Did he buy firearms locally? Did he buy armor-piercing ammunition? But my point here is, once I find out about this person, I can get mental health professionals to get involved with him.
Prevent something before it happens.
That's right.
Now, there will be some sheriffs say, well, I'm worried it'll be punitive. What if I call the hotline? I don't want this to be a punitive type of thing where we're out there putting them on our radar. How do you assuage those kind of concerns?
Yeah. First of all, this is not about arrest. This is about prevention. Law enforcement's really good at responding after the fact. We got great active shooter policies. Sure. The schools have lockdowns, but that's after something's happened. What I want to do is I want to get to these people that need help, get to the people that have anger issues before they do these bad things.
Let me ask you, a sad commentary when you read, or as I cited a report that I saw in the Miami Herald last week, and you've talked about this as well, that a PBSO has to look at shouldering more of this because mental health resources are so underfunded. In fact, Florida, I think the second lowest mental health funding in the United States, according to a survey we ran on News Channel 5. Yeah. As you go beyond PBSO, talk about the bigger picture of how this all ties together and where we're going to go or not go as a country if we don't look at not only gun issues, but the mental health aspect in totality.
Yeah. This is a total puzzle. There's no one piece that's not important, more important than the other. It has to be a mental health component here. There has to be stricter gun laws component here if we're going to really make an emphasis on this. We can't turn our back in 2 weeks and say business as usual. We're not going to pay attention to people who have issues.
And how often do your men and women on the street run into situations where people say to them after the fact, I thought something was wrong. They seemed like they might be intent on doing something bad. Maybe they expressed that they were going to do so, but I didn't want to say anything. Mental health is still very stigmatized in this country. Do you see that scenario play out all the time?
Yeah, all the time. We went to over 2,000 calls for service last year involving mental health issues. That's a lot of calls for service. And everybody that was around that particular issue or involved in it says, they were acting strange ahead of time. They had unusual behavior. They made comments that said they were going to do bad things. Even family members want to have an avenue to get some people some help. Again, it's not about arresting somebody. What I want to do is identify the individuals that need to get into the mental health system and get them the help they need. But to do that, we've got to fund mental health facilities properly. and then get them the help they need.
Some will argue, however well-intended, that all you can do is stick a finger in the dike. Your argument would be you've got to start sticking a finger in the dike somewhere.
Yeah, the water's leaking out, and nobody's got their finger anywhere right now.
One final thought, Sheriff, you look at this with your professional hat, and yet everybody in this country has looked at this from a very personal point of view. As a dad yourself, as an American, do you feel we're really at a crossroads? And as you look at it, not just with your professional hat, what are your final thoughts on where we are, where we need to be, how this has impacted everybody, including you, and what we must do at minimum to move forward?
Yeah, I think that personally, this right here was an incident. If there's anything that's good that's going to come out of this, and I tend to believe sometimes no matter how bad the event, something good will come out of it. Something good's going to come out of this, and the good that's going to come out of it is I don't think people are going to stop the conversation. You know, after Columbine, a couple weeks later, business back as usual. After the movie theater thing, you know, it kind of died down. There was a little bit of conversation. This particular thing was so horrific with 5, 6, and 7-year-old kids that I think that this is going to continue until some tangible results come out of this. I don't think people are going to let it drop. When you've got gun stores like Walmart, the Dick's Sporting Goods, some private gun stores that have already voluntarily taken assault weapons off the shelves and high-capacity magazines, you haven't seen that in a long time. People are serious about this. They're not going to let this go, and I think rightfully so, because, I mean, to me personally, you know, and I think I'm a pretty hardened veteran. It touched me personally. I mean, I just can't imagine a 6-year-old child being shot 11 times. Just horrific.
Sheriff, we thank you for taking time to be with us as part of a conversation, a dialogue that will go on. We'll stay in touch as your hotline gets up and running. Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, thanks for taking time to be with us on To the Point. Coming up next, our roundtable looks at the politics behind gun control legislation. We've been talking about the newest push for stricter gun control measures, but what about the politics behind that and where it goes or where it doesn't go? For some insight, we have News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, longtime political reporter in the state of Florida, one of the real veterans on the political scene and author now of the CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We'll begin with you, Brian. If there are going to be more gun restrictions, and that's still the operative word, how will the blend of that happen, do you think, in Florida versus at the level all the way up to Congress, Washington state laws? Or do you see anything changing at all?
Well, I think it's tough to get significant gun control legislation through the Florida legislature.
Even with this?
Even with this. Dennis Baxley, the representative from Ocala, who gave us the Stand Your Ground law that led to the Trayvon Martin shooting incident, he, after the incident in Newtown, said he wanted to arm people at the schools. And he's not alone in that thinking. Last week we had our 1 millionth concealed weapon permit signed, and Agricultural Commissioner Adam Putnam had held a press conference just before the Newton thing to applaud our 1 millionth concealed weapon permit. That means that 1 out of 15 Florida adults have a concealed weapon permit. The climate in this state has always been pro-gun. I think it's going to continue to be pro-gun, and I don't really believe we're going to have significant change.
At the federal level, Dr. Watson?
Yeah, I'm apt to agree with Brian. Well, on one hand, they say that the best way to tell if you're a Democrat or Republican, more than ethnicity, religion, income, whatever, is the issue of guns. If you own a gun, more likely to be a Republican if you don't own one, and in your position on gun control. The Democrats have a slight advantage in the Senate in terms of the number of votes they have. But even most analysts are saying they probably won't even get through the Senate with a Democratic edge. But there's two recent...
Talking Washington.
Talking Washington, D.C. Here in Florida, the Republicans have, solid block on the House. And, twice as many folks in the State House. Big advantage in the State Senate. Two developments nationally that might factor in here. Number one, you had a couple of moderate Democrats who have always been pro-gun, Senator Warner in Virginia, Senator Manchin in West Virginia, that came out and said, look, we've always been solid with the NRA, we've been pro-gun, but enough is enough. So you have some moderates that are starting to move in that direction. And secondly, the Democratic Party's talking points are, they believe that there's a wedge that can be driven between the NRA, the National Rifle Association, the leadership, and the membership. The leadership is very hardline on opposing any kind of gun control, but the membership would be willing perhaps to limit assault weapons, limit the clip size, and some things on the margin. So the Democratic Party is now seeing an opportunity to try to drive a wedge between the all-powerful gun lobby and maybe the membership, the rank and file.
So to be clear for our viewers, you see that if any change happens, it will be change mandated out of Washington that we'll have to abide by in Florida, not Tallahassee.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very tough. And I think we should keep in mind that the history of the state is that, you know, with Democrats in charge, it was largely still pro-gun.
Yes.
Governor Lawton Childs liked to go turkey hunting, and he was pro-gun. I think if Lawton Childs were alive today, he probably would oppose assault rifles and these large magazines. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, Governor Scott has not come out very forcefully on this issue one way or the other. He's pro-gun, but he's, in light of the Newtown shootings, he's inclined at this point to continue to study the issue, and it'll be interesting to see what position he ultimately
I don't think
takes.
there's going to be anything sweeping, but I think in Washington we're liable to see it on the margins. There's a reasonable amount of broad support for small things on the margins, opposition to assault weapons, opposition to these large clips where you have 30, 40, or whatever rounds. You can still go deer hunting or turkey hunting with, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds. Better background checks, maybe a different permitting system. So I think at the federal level, we'll see a little bit of that. The president has appointed the Vice President Biden to lead this effort. But then there's on a larger level, there's other things. For example, mental health issues. There's probably going to be some movement at the federal level to take a look at that. Just even a national conversation about violence in society, violent video games, and things of that effect. So I don't think we're going to see anything sweeping. But what I think we're going to see is a lot of little chipping away, you know, pennies, nickels, change kind of things, rather than there will not be a sweeping gun law that comes through Congress.
You two seem somewhat more pessimistic than some of what you're hearing, or perhaps more realistic, many would argue, about the politics of where this goes, despite this heinous atrocity that happened in Newtown. How far the public outrage will really carry the change in laws?
Well, I mean, I agree completely with Robert. I mean, the president has already announced that he's going to move forward with some kind of effort to change the gun laws.
But whether you get the
in
votes
January.
for it is
right. And I think on the national level, there's probably a greater chance that something will happen in D.C. But I just don't see it happening in Florida. When the first reaction from one of the leading gun proponents is that we should arm the principals and arm some of the other people in the schools as a way of deterrence. And there are others who are saying that around the country. You know, I just don't see, I haven't heard anyone yet in a position of leadership in the state say that it was time to look at our gun laws in Florida in a serious way.
The state of South Carolina has had a law introduced to arm school teachers. So that kind of, you know, throw more oil on the fire kind of a response. If you look at it this way, what happened in Newtown, it wasn't unprecedented. From Virginia Tech to Columbine, movie theaters, post offices. I mean, there's a long history of this. Yet, in the last 3 decades or so, we've seen very little movement in gun control except basically 2 things. The Brady Bill, which came in under Bill Clinton, named for Ronald Reagan's former press secretary when Reagan was shot. And secondly, Clinton pushed an assault weapon ban.
But many argue our instinctive need and desire to protect children might be what this time around makes some significant difference.
But I think if that were going to happen, and it still may, I mean, we're early in this, and I think thoughtful people are saying we need to at least have the discussion. But as I've already said, I mean, Governor Scott has not taken a position yet. The leadership in the Florida House and Senate have not taken a position yet on this. So
don't hold your breath if they necessarily will.
I'm waiting for them to say something.
And that, by the way, others have said you have to be careful in that statement. The loss of these children's lives and the 6 adults, just so horrible. Any life lost to violence is horrible.
Yeah.
But people have said there's a particular resonance here. You're saying yes, there is, but
yes,
whether
there is.
But whether there's a political calculation out of it that changes laws, we'll see.
And people are pointing to things like video games and the mental health society and the coarsening of the culture and movies. And as someone said the other day, you know, that same thing is happening in Europe and other parts of the world, the developed world, first world countries, and they don't have the kind of violence we have in this country.
But it should be part of the conversation, though, at least.
Absolutely.
And it will be part of our ongoing conversation in the next year and beyond. We'll be back in just a moment. Now time for the Watson wrap-up and their Crowley closer. Robert?
Michael, this week we lost one of the greats in the Senate, Senator Dan Inouye from Hawaii. Been in the Senate 50 years, was in the House before that. In fact, since Hawaii became a state in 1959, this is the first time Inouye has not been in office. Medal of Honor winner, lost his arm in World War II, a member of the 442nd, the most celebrated military unit perhaps in all of the World War II.
Brian, the
Well,
Crowley
first,
closure.
Merry Christmas to everyone as we get ready to celebrate Christmas. And I would like to think that our Florida politicians would give us all a gift by promising to be thoughtful in the coming year and do what's best for Floridians and perhaps not engage in the silly combativeness that often hurts the state.
We hope that that echoes all the way to Tallahassee and beyond. Wishing you and your families a wonderful Christmas season.
Likewise.
And of course, wishing you and yours a wonderful holiday. Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you for spending time with us on today's To The Point. If you'd like to send us a comment about today's broadcast, please go to WPTV.com and click on our political link. Again, we hope you have a wonderful Christmas season and on into a great new year. Enjoy the rest of your day.